Welcome to the Holistic Career Change Podcast, one-stop shop for everyone feeling stuck in their career and who are looking to identify, change, and succeed at their new fulfilling work. I'm your host, Vilma. Let's go. Hi lovers, how are you? I really hope that each and every one of you had an amazing week. I hope that you had a very restful and fun weekend and that you're ready to face this Monday. We've been having super crazy weather in this part of Europe the last couple of days. It has gone completely bipolar on us. It was snowing the other day, and actually it was snowing today, which at the end of April in spring is usually pretty unheard of. And I think actually it has not been exclusive to this region though, and people are reporting similar unusual changes in weather. And I'm not going to be talking about climate change, even though this is something I'm passionate about. I think this is what has become the norm now. Whenever we notice the weather acting up, we always tend to end the conversation by shaking our heads, saying, "Oh well, climate change." Anyway. This week's episode is going to be one of those short and sweet ones. I'm not sure about the short, but hopefully it will be sweet enough for you. When preparing for the podcast recordings, I think I've mentioned that before. I tend to go to a place of what did I need to hear when I was feeling lost, stuck, and pretty miserable in my life. And I also look at my current clients and I try to pick out certain patterns that they are going through. You've probably noticed that as you go through life, there are certain topics and themes that emerge around the same time for quite a few people. So say you meet a friend you had not spoken to for a while, and then you start opening up and sharing, and you realize you are actually living on what I like to call similar theme songs. For me personally, I do tend to go through these phases of particular mini obsessions. So it could be, like zero waste products. It could be shadow work. It could be working on a relationship with my mother. By the way, that work is never finished. I feel like, gosh, is there a podcast on relationships with mothers? Because I feel like, even when our parents pass away, I feel like that continues to be one of the main themes for the rest of our lives, really. So, I may be going through one of these phases and then I bump into people telling me that actually these were similar topics that they had been trying to unpack for themselves. And then we say, oh, something must be in the air. But it can actually be explained from many different angles. Like there's this beehive, theory, the beehive mentality, or us being connected to the same quote unquote cloud of collective consciousness, us attracting people who are essentially vibrating in the energy of similar frequency as we do, and so on and so forth. There are many explanations for this. And where I'm going with this is that lately the theme that's been coming up with my clients especially is their ability to feel safe and trust the unfolding process and dropping the urgency to control the situation that they're in. Now, I've said this before and I feel like I need to throw that disclaimer out there. I'm a recovering product of the corporate system, okay? And I'm someone who used to thrive on control, on organizing, on color coding, on cleaning, clearing, and trigger removing. I used to be known for having zero tolerance for anything that was uncertain, anything that was unclear, and that could not be labeled and filed away. And this made me an efficiency machine at work when I had to troubleshoot and create certain processes that would be lean and mean. And I was also someone who completely refused to deal with any emotional unclarity in my private life. So if you were someone who had hurt me, you would wake up blocked and deleted from my life, essentially. I didn't even care for explanations. I was ruthless. And if there was a romantic connection that was going south, that person would be blocked, deleted, and, filed away under too much hassle, don't have time. Done and dusted. I was really avoiding to deal with any question marks in my life. My coping mechanism was simply removing everything that could even look like remotely something that would cause me unpleasant emotions, and I would only rely on tangible data. Until, of course, life taught me otherwise in many, many painful ways. So my point is that if I could learn how to flow with all of the twists and turns, so can you. I have no doubt in my mind. And the only reason why transition in your career may feel scary to you is because deep inside you're afraid that you may not be able to cope and control. I don't know why it came out in that way. Yeah, so you're afraid because you are worried that you not be able to control all of the expected and unexpected emotions that will resurface as a result of this pivot. Changing the course of your life and career is a major stress factor for your nervous system, which means that your nervous system is prone to interpreting this change as a threat. And when our system believes that it's dealing with a real or perceived threat, it will release a stress response. Firstly, our sympathetic nervous system will take over, which is, usually responsible for physical adjustments in response to a stressor. So basically, when the system registers threat, it prepares you to get to safety. So you will start feeling certain physical symptoms like your breath will become more shallow, you will have heart palpitations, there'll be a rise in adrenaline. So basically, your system is preparing for you to get to safety. By the way, your response to this perceived threat will be even further intensified if you experience some sort of trauma in your life. And let's be honest here, finding a person who could be objectively trauma-free is like, like finding a 4-leaf clover, even if that. We've all been exposed to certain level of trauma. And trauma also does not necessarily mean that something super dramatic or scary has happened to you in the past. Trauma is essentially anything that our nervous system cannot comfortably process. We can have trauma from direct life experiences, and we can also have trauma that's cultural. Usually it could be related to race. We could have trauma that's ancestral. So there are many, many different layers. It's a very complicated layered cake. And obviously this is not the point of the podcast, but I wanted to draw your attention that will also be playing a role, and that will also be kicked off once you undergo this career change process. So when we have this unprocessed trauma, it means that our stress responses can be fired up unexpectedly. It's almost like there's a bug in the software. And this may mean that you can be a little more sensitive and more stress averse to introduce certain changes in life. You know these people who, for instance, don't like surprises. That means that the nervous system is more sensitive to something that is unknown. They perceive a surprise as a threat. And you may, in fact, be in the current job where you're suffering or you feel unfulfilled, yet making a change may feel like more than you can handle and it feels too overwhelming. And if that is something that you are going through, that could be an indication that it has to do with your capacity of the nervous system to process the change. So in and of itself, this whole career change process is one massive threat to your nervous system. And when there's a threat, we humans collectively tend to respond in 4 main ways: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And I'm sure that you've heard of all of them or some of them in the past. And we usually tend to default to one or two of them. And sometimes even four of them can be fired up at the same time. And what I really wanted to do today is to go through them really briefly and describe each of them, as I believe that this information will serve you not only when it comes to you changing the career, but also in general when you notice yourself react to certain situations and sometimes even to certain people. So the first response is fight. Pretty self-explanatory, right? If we feel like we want to fight and we get aggressive in a stressful situation, it means that our system finds safety in defeating and dominating the threat. So if you're someone who finds yourself getting irritated, intolerant of others sometimes, then it could mean that one of your default stress responses is fight. We often see this response expressed in male behavior, where this aggression is directed outwards at others, right? And a lot of the times this behavior is justified because we say like, oh, this man is really protective of his family, right? So if he sees that there's a threat, or if someone is in the bar hitting on their wife, they will get aggressive, right? That's their stress response. That's how they want to deal with something that does not feel safe, by dominating the threat, by fighting the threat. Interestingly enough, the fight mechanism has not often been attributed to women, but what's important to know is that while male direct this response to outwards or to other people, women also have this response, but it's often directed inwards. That means anger against ourselves. So this could mean that we may be having a very aggressive internal dialogue, that we have that very angry, rude, mean inner aggressor. We may be getting upset with ourselves if we underperform. We may not be compassionate and forgiving towards our perceived failures. We may not give ourselves enough grace when we think we're not doing enough or being enough. We get angry with ourselves, right? And if it's taken even further, it could manifest itself through certain self-harming ways, right? Even physical self-harm. Now, the second response is flight. And here the belief is that you will be safe and you will be lovable only when you're perfect. So flight is very typical response in my fellow perfectionists. These are the people who are always busy and they always want things to be perfect. They are also the ones who tend to have very obsessive thought patterns. You know, that racing mind, the monkey mind. They find it really hard to sit still. They will do the best they can to cram the calendars as much as they can, just so they wouldn't have time to deal with any unpleasant emotion. So these are, the people who are always on the run. They're always telling you off a million things that they're doing. They don't like to be alone, always on flight, right? Always doing something. And really what it is just them trying to outrun their vulnerability, because their emotions may not feel safe to them, right? The third response is freeze. And this is where your nervous system will feel safe when you are in isolation. If you have tendencies to close up, to enter this hermit mode, it may be a signal that you are getting overexposed and overwhelmed, and then people will be perceived as dangerous by your nervous system. So you may feel like hiding out. The freeze response is also when we find ourselves numbing for comfort. So that is all the eating, drinking, mindless scrolling, seeking for instant approval and validation on social media. That is numbing yourself out. I'm sure you've noticed this freeze response also in others when, say, in certain situations, they say, I don't know what to say. Or they look really disassociated and vacant and almost spaced out, disoriented either. That means that the nervous system has taken them to freeze response. So for instance, from my personal life, I can give an example. I'm someone who tends to probably go to the fight mode, right? Like if something is not going my way, I will get angry either internally or at other people, right? So if someone is like, I don't know, literally littering on the street, I'll probably be the person who will come up to that person and ask them politely but sternly to pick up the rubbish, right? And then, for instance, if I'm anywhere, with my mother, like she had certain health issues this past year, and I used to, drive her to the doctors. She was so stressed, she would go into freeze mode. She would not even be able to respond to doctor's questions, right? So the doctor would be, asking her clarifying questions regarding her, her health. And she would forget. She would completely forget even her, date of birth. So to this extent that she would even ask me to enter the doctor's room with her so I could help her respond, because she already knows that that's when she's stressed, when there's threats registered in her environment, she cannot function mentally, right? Her mental capacity is being impaired. And, whereas I'm someone who gets super mobilized when I'm stressed, right? And the last but not least, stress response, which was, by the way, added in a little bit later after some research, is called fawn. And this is where safety is found by giving up your needs and desires and complying and agreeing with whoever or whatever is perceived as an attacker by our system. So this is your yes people, and this is where people pleasing comes in, and these people tend to over-explain, over-apologize. These people struggle with setting healthy boundaries. They're usually indecisive. They tend to value external feedback over their own judgment. This is fawn response. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm just someone who cannot speak up. Like I just feel uncomfortable speaking up." A lot of the times it just means that that's your stress response. That's not part of your identity. It just means that you have a very sensitive internal system that registers speaking up and opposing someone as incredible threat and danger to your life, essentially, right? To your safety. Now, like I've mentioned, you may have more than one response firing up in the same situation. And the reason why I'm taking the time to walk you through all of them is because I'd like to ask you to pay very careful attention to which of these responses you are noticing right now when you think that you need to, quote unquote, work on changing your career, or you need to, quote unquote, think about changing your career. And especially if you're someone who's transitioning in your career using the method that I'm a huge fan of, which is switching gradually and strategically by cutting out any losses to the max, this means that there will be a period of time where you will be required to find the time and energy to plant those new seeds of the new career or new business and look after them as they sprout. So, for example, one of my clients who was undergoing a career transition, and she was shadowing someone in the new industry that she was aiming to transition into, she would also get certain homework that she would need to do in the evening. And very often she would find herself to default to freeze mode. So in the evening, she would essentially be mismanaging her time, Netflixing. And then, when she would show up for sessions and I would ask her for, how the week went, she would say, "Oh, I just kept on running out of time to work on career change." And when we looked into her habitual patterns when it comes to her planning her time, we realized just how much time she was spending in this freeze mode, like numbing for comfort, because her nervous system felt overloaded. She felt stressed. And the only way she knew how to deal without having the awareness of what was going on with her, is by trying to soothe her by going into the freeze mode. Or another client would get very carried away with doing her homework. Like, I would assign certain worksheets as I do, and she would come back having done this work. And she would keep on asking me whether her answers to my questions were, quote unquote, correct. And if you've been listening to me for some time, There's no such thing as right or wrong answer. There's just the answer that is yours, the answer that is your truth. So she was often defaulting to flight mode, focusing on the structure of her answers versus wanting to analyze the emotion and the sentiment behind them, right? Because she just wanted to provide me with perfect answers and not have to deal with the emotional charge of what was standing behind those answers. And perhaps even listening to this, you're already having a few aha moments when it comes to you, or maybe when it comes to how those people you care about are responding in certain situations. So the career change or the career alignment, the term that I actually prefer to use, is essentially a prolonged period of your nervous system having to react to all kinds of triggers and perceived threats as your actions will not feel safe. This journey may not feel safe for you, and the way to solve for it is to show, teach, and train yourself to open up and start trusting that this process is unfolding in the exact perfect way to serve you and to keep you safe. And is happening in the exact pace that you need to make the switch. So what I really like to offer you is to lean into this belief that is all unfolding for you in the perfect way, and at the same time, stay aware and observe when your system goes into one of these adaptive stress responses. I want you to notice them in the moment, and I want you to name them. Not just automatically, blindly go into them, but notice as you get into them. Sometimes maybe you will even notice once you're 5 minutes into scrolling, or like 30 minutes into watching the Friends episode that you've seen 15 times, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in freeze mode. I'm numbing myself. What am I refusing to deal with here? Where is the resistance? So it's really important to notice and name it. And I want you to hear your brain freaking out, observe you not wanting to, say, follow through with your plan or with something that you said you would do, wanting to quit. Your brain will want you to push the timeline. It will convince you that, actually, maybe you're not doing that bad and other people are so much worse. Like, your brain, as I told you many times, will be completely ruthless in trying to talk you out of this change. It will pull out all of the big boy guns, like literally, like it will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. And I want you to notice that, thank your system for protecting you, and continue anyway. While this is not an easy way to do it, this is the only way you can create those new neural pathways and rewire your default response to change. Now, if this method of you observing and naming your response is not working, then it means that whatever plan that you have devised for yourself or whatever activities that you think you need to take is still too much to embrace, and it feels too overwhelming to handle for your nervous system. Then what you need to do, you have to break it down into even smaller tasks. And even it may look like committing to 5 or 10 minutes of journaling about your ideal career a day. Maybe this is where you need to start for your system to feel safe, embracing this huge, huge shift in your life. Break it down into smaller tasks as much as you can. And so in that way, you will help yourself to not feel threatened, and your system will not be resisting to whatever it is that you're trying to introduce into your life, right? You will feel safer in this process. Like, slowly but surely, you'll be committing to that daily change and introducing the daily new information that it will become the new normal for your system. It will not register it as a threat anymore. And in addition, I'd also like to offer you this beautiful practice. I would even suggest you to do this daily, especially if you are someone who does feel quite threatened and quite unsafe on this whole journey. So what I want you to do is to find a quiet space where you feel comfortable, and I want you to place your hand on your heart and lovingly tell yourself, I will share what I'd like you to tell yourself. However, I'd also like you to just take this idea and make it your own and use the words that make sense to you. So, for instance, the way I used to do it back in the day is I would say something like this. I would place my hand on my heart and I would say, I'm safe. It's safe for me to explore my options. It's safe for me to change my life around. I am safe. I am safe in spite of the life choices that I will make. I will remain safe even if others may not understand or support my choices. I am safe. I support me. It's safe for me to unfold. And I would just go on like this. Whatever comes, sometimes it would be a different message a day, but it would be around me reminding myself that I'm safe, me calming myself down, almost like talking to a child who was scared. Because essentially that it is. That's that little bit of inner child work that cannot hurt you. And by the way, this whole topic of safety, I didn't want to expand on it too much, but this will be particularly relevant for those of you who would like to transition into professions that include being of service. So any sort of healing, coaching, counseling, people with the most tender hearts of service are usually also the ones who have the biggest fear in sharing their message and in feeling safe on this planet in general. And it actually all goes back to the ancestral trauma, which I've touched upon. So if this is resonating with you, I really want you to look into it because there's a very strong correlation. All of my clients, including, myself, I've been on this journey being a very sensitive person for as long as I can remember myself. I really struggle with feeling safe and grounded in this world. So there was a huge chunk of work that I needed to do in order for me to start feeling like I belong here. That really resonated with me as I said that. Like I felt it in my body. I belong here. That's something that you could also add to that little daily practice that I share with you where you're saying that you're safe. Also remind yourself that you belong here. That is safe for you to take up space. That's another huge one that a lot of quote unquote light workers, for the lack of a better word, struggle with. They feel like they are not allowed to essentially come out and to share with the world that they have certain, say, healing gifts that they have. They never felt safe to share this. And there's a huge fear of judgment in them. So if you are, like I said, transitioning into these careers, this will be usually, that part of the journey that I really would like for you to take seriously, because if you don't address it now and if you force yourself into just taking the action and refusing to deal or acknowledge that like really deep-seated fear that you have, that feeling of unsafeness and insecurity that you have, it will just catch up with you in so many big, nasty ways that is going to take you down. It could take you down at any stage in your business, right? So the earlier you include this into your practice, I think the more supported and the more safe you'll feel. And just a reminder to all of you, all of your life is happening for you always. It's never against you. All of it, no matter what circumstances you're in, is here to serve your highest expression and your evolution. Whatever you're going through, the key is to open up to this current experience and just accept it. I know that it's easier said than done, okay? I've done this work. I've been there. I know that it sounds so easy, but I really just want you guys to save the time, to use the lessons that I've learned, to get those takeaways that I'm having from working with other people who are doing this work daily with me, and I want you to use it and implement it. Now, without getting too dramatic and emotional, the message that is coming through to me very, very clear and has been coming through for quite some time is that the world right now, more than ever before, needs your light. The world needs your medicine, your unique gifts that only you have. And there's this certain healing in spite of what you choose to do in your life. Maybe you'll choose to be a carpenter. Maybe you'll choose to open up a bakery and, serve fresh bread in the morning for people. Like, that is your light. That is exactly what the world needs right now. So if you're hearing this calling to change something up, if you're receiving those messages, those whispers, those invitations, those signs, I really sincerely want to ask you to answer them. You're hearing them for a reason. You're not crazy. It's not an accident that you're going through this. You're being invited to step into your purpose. And I'm having all body goosebumps as I'm recording this. Happens to me when the energy is strong. Anyway, so this is where I wanted to end. I hope that this was useful. And I'm sending you so much love to each and every one of you. And don't forget to say hi to me on Instagram. And I will speak to you next week. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you enjoy this content, make sure you subscribe. And don't forget to pass this along to anyone who's thinking of a career change. Every little helps.